In today's episode, we're going to answer the question once and for all, what's better for weight loss, Pilates or cardio? And we're going to do it by looking at the science. So this is a lecture I recorded earlier this year for my Diploma of Clinical Pilates students, and looks at the most recent, most high quality evidence on what actually works for weight loss. We're going to look at Pilates, we're going to look at cardio. We're also going to throw in resistance training and diet, because you kind of ignore either of those things when it comes to weight loss. And so by the end of this episode, you will know exactly what to do to either lose weight yourself or to help other people do it, both in terms of the mechanics, so the exercise, the diet, all that kind of stuff, and also the behavior change aspect, because that's really important. It's probably more important, it turns out, than actually what you do is that you do it. So stick around and you will be much wiser and able to become more lean and toned if you desire to do so by the end of this episode. Pilates and weight loss. We've got really two major components of the lecture today. The first is the mechanics, like just the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of what actually works for weight loss. And the second part is the behavior change component, the coaching component, because really all of the strategies for weight loss boil down to eat less and exercise more. And I'm sure that's not news to anyone. So the hard part is not knowing really what to do. It's knowing how to make yourself do it, or knowing how to help someone else do it. So we're going to spend the first part making sure that if we do give advice, it's evidence-based advice. And the second part is about how to help people actually do the things they need to do in order to maintain that and stick to it. All right. So firstly, there is such a thing as a healthy weight range. Abs are made in the kitchen, not in the Pilates class. During weight loss, if we prioritize resistance training and high protein, we lose fat instead of muscle. Otherwise, we lose muscle and fat. And which diet you choose is way less important than whether you just stick to the diet. So the best diet is the diet that you stick to. And there are many ways we can make it easy to stick to a diet, by including high protein with every meal, high fiber, low calorie flavorings, setting goals, keeping a food and exercise diary, and tracking weight daily or weekly. So those are all the hows. And then we're going to talk about how to coach, how to actually help people do the things they need to do. All right. So firstly, there is such a thing as a healthy weight range. Now, I know I included this here because I think there's a lot of kind of, I don't know, ethical ambivalence amongst a lot of people about, is it sort of ethically good to help people lose weight, or is it ethically bad? And I'm not really, I guess I don't really have a position on that, and that's not what this lecture is about. It's just about, we as Pilates instructors, we're here to help people live healthier, happier lives. And there is such a thing as a healthy weight range. And I think the evidence for that is pretty much indisputable. I'm going to share it with you in a minute. And so if that's something that you want to help your clients with, and it's something that they want help with, that's something we can help people with. And that's a way to help people live happier, healthier lives. All right. So firstly, in public health studies, so when they're talking about like big cohorts of people and looking at the correlations between weight and health, typically they measure something called body mass index, or BMI, which is your weight in kilograms divided by your height squared in meters. And BMI is it turns out that on a population level, like if you're looking at hundreds of thousands or millions of people, it has a very strong correlation with body fatness levels. Like, people with a higher BMI tend to have more body fat. But on an individual level, that breaks down. So, for example, people who have more muscle mass tend to have a higher BMI, but they're not overweight, right? I've actually got a BMI of 30, which puts me in the obese category. So basically, the more athletic somebody is, man or woman, the less useful BMI is as a tool for measuring their health, right? So the BMI applies, when you take 10 million people, it's a really useful tool because very few of those 10 million people are athletic, right? If there's 3 million of those people who are obese, according to BMI, it's very unlikely that those 3 million are like 3 million bodybuilders or elite sports people. It's more likely they're just like regular folks who are overweight. So BMI is a great tool on a population basis. It gives us good stats, but it's not something we should use with our clients really because it doesn't. It kind of breaks down on an individual level because it doesn't really measure how much of that weight is fat and how much of it is muscle. Muscle actually, the more muscle you have, the less like heart disease, etc. you have. So muscles are very healthy metabolic factor. And muscle is heavier than fat, yes, per like 1 cubic centimeter of muscle weighs more than 1 cubic centimeter of fat. All right. So the World Health Organization defines BMI of 18.5 to 24.9 as healthy. And here's, you can read about the World Health Organization position there. So below 18.5, they define as underweight. Okay, and above 25 is overweight, and above 30 is obese, according to the World Health Organization. Actually, that according to the most recent literature, that's probably not quite optimal. In this study, which is from 2016, it's a systematic review, or it's actually a meta-analysis of 239 prospective studies with 10.6 million participants. So this is a very, very big study, and we can expect that these numbers are pretty accurate. They found that between 20 and 25 was the lowest risk. So actually it wasn't 18.5 that was healthy. It was actually 20 and above that was healthy. And so this is along the bottom here. This is BMI. Okay, there's 15 BMI here, 20, 25, 30, etc. And this is the chance of dying of any cause during the study. So this is the baseline. This is double chance, 4 times chance, 8 times chance. And obviously this is less than baseline. And so what they found was somewhere between here, this 20 BMI and 25 BMI, these people had the lowest risk of dying, right? And as you got thinner or fatter, the risk basically increased linearly in either direction. What they found was that above BMI of 25, there's a linear association with cardiovascular disease deaths, so stroke, heart attack, heart failure, peripheral artery disease, etc. And below 20, there was a linear increase in respiratory and cardiovascular deaths. So, we could look at, specific health outcomes as well, but like really the all-cause mortality, I think, for me anyway, is the most compelling one. And this very clearly shows a J-shaped association. So this group we're looking at here is people 50 to 69 years old at baseline. Okay, but they've also got a similar graph to people who are under 50 and people who are over 69, and they're exactly the same shape. And you can read that study here. And this study looked at 18,000 people and started out with people who they looked at the difference. They looked at whether there was a difference between people who started out at baseline as what they defined as metabolically healthy, overweight or obese people. So people who had increased BMI or increased waist circumference, But all of the other components of what they call a metabolic syndrome, which is a cluster of components that basically are the precursors of type 2 diabetes and heart disease. So things like raised blood triglyceride levels, raised cholesterol, raised blood pressure, atherosclerosis, a constellation of factors, increased systemic inflammation, a constellation of factors that are the precursors of cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes. And so what they looked at was people who were overweight or obese but didn't have any of those. They didn't have raised blood pressure. They didn't have, increased triglycerides or cholesterol or atherosclerosis or any of those things. And then they looked at metabolically healthy normal weight people, so people who weren't overweight or obese and also didn't have any of those other risk factors. Then they followed them for, I think it was 16 years. And what they found was people who, this is metabolically healthy normal weight, MHNW, and this is metabolically healthy overweight or obese folk. And what they found was for basically everyone in the study put on weight over 16 years. Not everyone, but like the vast majority. And what they found was when these people gained weight, the metabolically healthy overweight people had a significantly increased risk of developing those things like high blood pressure and high blood triglycerides, which I can't say apparently this morning, and cholesterolemia and heart disease and etc. So when both of these groups, if they gained a similar amount of weight, these people had a significantly higher increase in risk. And the more weight people gained, the more their risk went up of developing those things. So there was definitely a correlation between starting out metabolically healthy but overweight, and then with further weight gain, becoming metabolically unhealthy. So I would say that it is possible to be overweight and not have, high blood pressure and be metabolically healthy. But that if what this study basically found was that metabolic health is a dynamic thing over time. And it's not like, okay, if you're 25 and you're metabolically healthy and overweight, we'll come back in 20 years and you probably won't be. And that's not a long-term situation that's sustainable. And so just in terms of like what is, obese and what is underweight and what is, healthy weight, like I said, BMI is not really a useful tool for an individual basis. So this is just like an FYI. This is from a guy I follow on social media, Menno Henselmans. That's his website there. I just lifted this photo from there. And these are women who had their body fat measured by DEXA, dual energy X-ray absorptiometry, which is a very accurate way of measuring lean body tissue and body fat. So these are very accurate measurements. And so just like when you look at humans, you can kind of calibrate and go, okay, this is what they would call essential body fat. So below this level, basically, you can't live. This is probably, from here to here is probably like the healthy range, when they're talking, 20 to 25 BMI. So this and this is probably in the healthy range. This would probably be underweight and this would probably be overweight. It's very hard to directly correlate like what percent body fat equates with what BMI. So, these are kind of roughly sort of guesstimates. I wasn't able to find any literature on, what percentage of body fat correlates with what BMI. So it's, but this is kind of the best I could find. And for men, similar. Okay, so this is definitely underweight, 4.1% body fat. People will suffer health consequences, negative health consequences at that level of body fat. Somewhere in here for men is like the healthy range, and this is overweight and obese progressively. So, just when you look at humans, that's to just give you a frame of reference. And again, I got this from Menno Henselmans, and that's in fact Menno Henselmans there. All right. So we saw that there is such a thing as a healthy weight range, and it's 20 to 25 BMI. All right. Abs are made in the kitchen, or AKA why doing lots of ab exercises won't give you abs. So there's a lot of research on this, as you can imagine. And what we find is do it following the minimum weekly physical activity guidelines basically results in minimal to no weight loss if you don't change your diet. But reducing how much you eat in terms of how many calories you eat significantly changes your body weight. And when you add energy restriction, which just means eating fewer calories, plus exercise, it's even better than either energy restriction or exercise. And so overall, what we see is exercise by itself does minimal, right? If you keep eating the same thing and just do more exercise, it will have some effect on your weight, but pretty minimal. And we'll talk about why that is in a moment. Whereas if you don't change your exercise habits, but you just reduce how many calories you eat, you're going to get a significant change in weight. So diet is better than exercise in terms of if you want to lose body fat. However, if you combine diet plus exercise, it's the best of all. So diet plus exercise is better than diet, and diet is better than exercise. All right, and so that's basically what they found here. And so the reason for that is interesting, that basically when people exercise more, so like when they do these controlled studies where they know exactly how many calories people eat every day, they know exactly how many calories they're burning every day, and they're just their metabolic functions of staying alive and beating their heart, then they measure exactly how many calories they burn in exercise. What they find is when people exercise more, so if you exercise, an extra 1,000 calories, say, well, you don't lose the amount of weight that you would predict by burning 1,000 calories. Calories, every gram of fat has 9 or 7, I can't remember, 7 or 9 calories in it, right? So if you burned 1,000 calories, you expect to lose like, whatever 1,000 divided by 9 is grams of fat, right, from your body. But what we find is people lose less than that. And that's a real head scratcher, because the laws of thermodynamics state that, well, you can't, if you go for a walk, the energy has to come from somewhere. And if you didn't eat more calories, well, it has to come from stored body fat. Like there's no other explanation for that. But what it turns out is, as people exercise more and burn more calories, what we then do unconsciously is burn fewer calories the rest of the day, because we fidget less, we move less, we sit down more and stand up less. So all of those things that we adjust our normal behaviors to burn fewer calories. So we might burn an extra 1,000 calories when we go for a walk, but then we burn 400 fewer calories by not fidgeting when we're sitting there. And so the more we exercise, the more we compensate by burning fewer calories at rest. And so when we exercise, we do see people lose a bit of fat if they increase their exercise. But the amount of fat people lose when they exercise is less than you would predict based on how much exercise they did. And the more you exercise, the bigger the difference, right? So if you do more and more and more and more and more exercise, you compensate more by just like lying on the sofa the rest of the time doing nothing. And I find it myself, right? If I go for a longer run than usual, I'm standing up right now at my standing desk. I just find myself unconsciously putting the desk down and sitting on my chair here when I give a lecture, and that's just part of normal human behavior. So that's the current best theory of why increasing exercise does help, but it doesn't help as much as you'd think it would help. with losing weight. Judith says, if BMI is a population measurement, why are we using it individually? Well, the reason why we use BMI at all is just because it's easy. Right? It's really easy to get height and weight off people. Like all you need to tape measure and a scale, and it's like a 1 minute process, right? But to accurately measure, say, body fat is really hard and expensive. Like you need $100,000 DEXA machine or a hydrostatic weighing. You have to dunk them underwater for 30 seconds with them not holding their breath. It's very hard to accurately measure body fat. And we can do it with, things like body fat calipers and stuff, but they're very, very inaccurate. They have high levels of error in the measurement. So, BMI it's a really blunt tool. It's very, there's no nuance to it at all. Can't distinguish between muscle or fat mass. But it's just really easy to measure. And so that's why we use it. We can use waist circumference, and there is probably a higher correlation between waist circumference and health outcomes than there is between BMI and health outcomes. So waist circumference is a really good measure of metabolic health. So yeah, that's a really good one. Hip to waist ratio. No, it's hip to waist ratio. I'm pretty sure, Judith, that it's actually good in men as well. Like in terms of as a predictor of metabolic health, hip to waist ratio is a very good one. And so basically, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's like you basically want your hips to be wider than your waist. And the more your hips are wider relative to your waist, the more metabolically healthy you are in general. So if you've got two people who've got the same amount of body fat, but one person carries the body fat in their lower body and their waist is narrow, and the other person carries their body fat in their upper body, they've got a wider waist and narrower hips, or the person with the more visceral fat, the more central fat, as opposed to lower body fat, will have statistically a much higher chance of all of those metabolic risk factors. And that's why probably, men have more heart attacks at an earlier age than women, because men tend to carry body fat in their upper body, whereas women on average, not all women obviously, but on average, women tend to carry more body fat in the lower body, which is metabolically less unhealthy. Okay. Now, if you want to use cardio to lose as part of a weight loss plan, you need to burn at least 2,000 kilocalories or 2,000 calories a week. It's still not as good as diet. Okay, the diet is your number one tool in your toolbox to reduce weight. But when you combine calorie restriction with 2,000 kilocalories a week of exercise, you get great results, like we saw on the previous slide. And 2,000 calories a week is, guess what? It's the top end of the physical activity guidelines. It's 300 minutes of moderate cardio, which is 60 minutes walk 5 days a week, or 150 minutes of vigorous cardio, which is a 30-minute run 5 days a week. So that's just the top end of the physical activity guidelines. All right, self-test. What does it mean to say that abs are made in the kitchen? Good answers. Just says that basically diet has a much bigger impact on your body weight than exercise does. Well, another way they say that is you can't outrun a bad diet, is another saying I've heard. All right. What is the most effective combination of diet and exercise for long-term weight loss? Great. I love, Alyssa, what you said there. Consistent. diet plus exercise. I think that's very, very important. So the diet you can stick to plus 2,000 kilocalories a week of cardio, best combination for losing weight. What amount of weekly cardio is associated with long-term weight loss? Great answers. Okay, basically an hour a day, 5 days a week of moderate, or 2,000 calories a week, 30 minutes run, 5 days a week. All of those mean the same thing. All right, so there is such a thing as a healthy weight range. Abs are made in the kitchen. And now, even though resistance training won't help you lose weight, we should prioritize it above cardio, is what I'm going to argue here for weight loss. Now, in a perfect world, we'd do both resistance and cardio, but not sure if you've noticed, but doesn't seem to be a perfect world. And sometimes people don't want to, or aren't ready to prioritize the hours in the week to do all of the above. So if you were just going to do one or the other, I would prioritize resistance training above cardio. And here's why. When you lose weight, you lose fat and muscle. But when you lose weight and eat high protein and do resistance training, you just lose fat and you keep the muscle. So you don't become skinny fat, in other words. Now, if you can create an energy deficit, so you burn more than you eat, of 500 calories, which for most people, the average, human adult of an average weight, an average level of activity is about a 25% reduction in calories, then that leads to, sustainable long-term weight loss. And if you add high protein resistance training, that will be almost all fat that you'll lose, not muscle. If you don't use high protein and resistance training, you'll lose probably equal amounts of fat and muscle. And if you make a bigger energy deficit, like if you have fewer calories than that, you will be more likely to lose more muscle. So it's actually better long term to do a relatively modest calorie deficit, not to go to extremes, and combine that with high protein and resistance training, because then over time, you're going to lose body fat, but not muscle. And of course, as we saw, resistance training means bringing a muscle group to near failure within something like 30 reps. And you can do that in Pilates. And if you're doing Pilates and you go near failure within 30 reps, it's resistance training and it will preserve muscle. And if you're doing Pilates and you don't go near failure within 30 reps, it's not resistance training and will not preserve muscle. So if you're going near failure within 30 reps, you're going to maintain that muscle mass. Marie says, is there any data on the effect of a lot of strength training but no cardio? Yeah, I have seen studies. You can lose weight without doing any cardio. The cardio is not required for weight loss. It enhances the effects of dieting, somewhat, slightly. But like the 80-20 rule of losing body fat is change your diet. If you're just going to do one thing to make the biggest difference, it would be change your diet. Cardio is optional. Adding resistance training to diet, has pretty much zero effect on weight loss. So resistance training won't make you lose weight, but it will make the weight you lose be fat, not muscle. Because, people say, I want to lose weight, but actually what they want to lose is fat. They don't want their muscles to waste away, presumably. Okay, self-test. True or false? When you lose weight without resistance training, you lose both fat and muscle? And the answer is true. True or false? When you combine caloric deficit with high protein and resistance training, you lose fat, but not muscle. And the answer is true. What daily energy deficit is associated with the greatest fat loss and the least loss of muscle in the long term? The answer is about 500 calorie a day deficit, or about 25% calorie deficit. Now, I kind of glossed over this on the slide, so let's see whether you took it in or not. What is high protein? Okay, pretty good answers. So the definition I'm working with here is at least 1.6 grams of protein per kilo of body mass per day, right? So just to keep the math really simple, if you're a 100 kilo person, that would be 160 grams of protein per day. Right? If you're a 50 kilo person, that would be 80 grams of protein per day. So it's 1.6 grams. I just sort of shorthand it to 2 grams because it makes the math a lot easier. So whatever you weigh in kilos, double that in grams, and that's how much protein you should have. Whatever you weigh in pounds, 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day, right? So if you weigh 130 pounds, have 130 grams of protein. And that is high protein. Judith, what is your question?
I have kind of a funny question here because, okay, so if you have a certain weight and you say like I need 1.6 grams of protein per kilo, but if you're overweight, so then you're basing that on your overweight.
Great question.
weight?
Actually, yeah, that's a really, really good question.
Yeah.
And the answer is no, it should be on your goal weight. It should be on your goal weight. Based on goal weight.
That makes sense.
Great question. All right. Give an example of an upper body and a lower body Pilates exercise with enough load to get, let's say, an average person near failure within 30 reps. So specify like how many springs or, whether their legs are straight or whatever. Like, okay, your average client comes in and you want to take them to failure within 30 reps on an upper body and a lower body exercise. What do you choose? It can be mat, reformer, Cadillac chair, whatever you want. Great answers, team. Spoken like someone who's gone to failure themselves and knows what it's all about. Well done. Amy asks thoughts on protein powder versus natural protein. So it's as a rule of thumb, it's always better to get your nutrients from actual food and preferably from whole foods, less processed foods. I'm sure that's not surprising to just about all of you. So by default, it's better to get all nutrients from whole foods, and it's not because protein in whole foods is better than protein in powder. Actually, that's not true at all. The powder is just as good, but the powder doesn't contain all of the other nutrients that you get in whole foods, right? So if you eat a steak, you get iron, you get all of the other stuff. If you eat beans or tofu or whatever, you get fiber, you get micronutrients and things. that you don't get in protein powder. So, by default, whole foods are best, but if you're on if you're eating a balanced diet of whole foods and you're still not getting enough protein, adding a scoop of protein powder is a fantastic way of enhancing, how much protein you get in your diet. And eating 1.6 to 2 grams of protein per kilo of body weight per day, that's a lot of protein. If you, for those of you who've done that and measured it out, it's like that's a truckload of protein. And you would basically have to be eating 3 eggs for breakfast, tuna for lunch, steak for dinner, and then a protein bar for, after dinner snack or whatever. It's very hard to accidentally eat that much protein unless you, intentionally plan for it. So what I find is I don't like to plan my meals around just massive amounts of protein because I just end up eating steak and eggs for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and that I don't want to do that. So I have a berry smoothie for breakfast, and I add a protein powder to it. So it's got berries and milk and banana and yogurt and spinach and all those good things which are actual foods, and then just enhance the protein content by whacking in some protein powder. Okay. All right. There is such a thing as a healthy weight range. Abs are made in the kitchen. Prioritize resistance training and high protein when you're in a caloric deficit. Otherwise, you lose muscle. And of course, if you can do cardio as well, great. So much the better. Cardio is fantastic, as you know, because you've done the physical activity guidelines week. So everyone should do cardio. But if you had to choose one or the other and your main priority in life right now is weight loss, I would prioritize resistance training. Which diet you choose is less important than just whether you stick to the diet. Right, so here is a description of how each of these different diets work for weight loss. So you can do the low-carb diet, which is where you eat fewer carbs and more foods rich in protein and fats. Or you can do the ketogenic diet, which is where you eat almost no carbs. You eat some protein and mostly fats. Or you can do the low-fat diet, where you avoid foods high in fat and eat mostly protein and carbs. Or you can do the intermittent fasting diet, which is where you restrict your eating to only a few hours a day or only certain days of the week. Like you might, eat 5 days of the week and fast 2 days a week, or you might eat between sort of midday and 8 p.m. and then fast the rest of the day. Or you can do the carnivore diet, which is where you avoid vegetables and eat only meat and animal products. Or you can do the vegan diet, where you avoid meat and animal products and eat only vegetables. And how these diets work for weight loss, I'm going to explain it to you. It's very complicated. They create a caloric deficit. So when you cut out food groups like carbs or fats or meat or vegetables, okay, there's less options for you to eat, so you end up eating less. And by eating less, you create a caloric deficit, and that is how weight loss occurs. When you eat only certain times of the day or certain days of the week, you end up eating less. So all of these diets can be effective for weight loss if you stick to it. And so whichever one of these is easiest for you to stick to is the one that's going to work best for you. And they all, from a mechanistic point of view, none of them seem to have any advantage over any other ones. So just another study on that. Okay. How do all diets work to achieve weight loss? Louise says some diets are more healthy than others. Yeah, I would argue probably the carnivore diet's not the healthiest diet. But just from the perspective of is it effective for losing weight? Yeah, can be if you stick to it. The answer is, how do all diets work to achieve weight loss? Is they create a caloric deficit. So here's a question for you. I've got a new diet. It's called the donut diet. You eat nothing but frosted donuts from Krispy Kreme, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's the only thing you eat. And the way it works is you measure out the calories in each donut and you create a 500 calorie a day deficit, right? But so within the calories that you're allowed to eat, 100% of those calories come from donuts, no other food sources. Will that diet result in weight loss? Yes or no? Yes, it will. Because the amount of weight you lose is determined by how many calories you eat. Now, I don't advocate that diet, and it's going to be very hard to create a caloric deficit eating nothing but donuts, because like 1,500 calories a day of donuts is probably like 1.5 donuts, right? And you'll be super hungry all the time, right? So it's probably not a really effective diet, but just from a mechanistic point of view, it doesn't matter what's in the diet. It's just the caloric total of the diet that determines whether you lose weight or gain weight or stay the same weight. All right, what's the best diet for weight loss? And the answer is the diet you stick to. Good answer. All right, what's even more important for weight loss than which diet you follow? Good answers. And the answer is consistency / sticking to the diet. Okay. There is such a thing as a healthy weight range. Abs are made in the kitchen. Prioritize resistance training and high protein. Which diet you choose is way less important than just whether you stick with it. But there are some tips and tricks and strategies in terms of diet that make it easier for most people to stick with the diet. And so this is where we start to get into the mindset and psychology aspect of weight loss, because really, I mean, I'm sure there's nothing terribly shocking about what I've shared with you today. For most of you, it's like, okay, if you want to lose weight, eat less and exercise more. So, duh. Okay, everybody knows that. So if people come to you, if your clients come to you and say, I want help losing weight, they don't need you to say, oh, that's simple. Just eat less and exercise more. Job done. Okay, great. What else do you want help with? Right? That's not going to solve their problem. They know what they should do, but the problem is they can't make themselves do it. Right? And so what they actually need help with is, how do I make myself do the things that I actually want to do and know I should do if I want to achieve the result I want to achieve, right? I want to eat less, but somehow I don't, right? So this is what people need help with, is the mindset of self-control, not just the like, well, eat less calories. Now, it turns out, and I didn't include, all of this literature because the lecture would have blown out to 4 hours, but and when I tell you this, you're going to go like, well, duh, the main reason people don't stick with their diet is, guess what? They get hungry, right? And it's really hard to stick to your diet when you're hungry, right? If you're on this super restrictive diet that's like inconvenient, means you can't go out, with friends. You always have to meal prep and plan your calories, and it's super boring and bland and tasteless, and you're always hungry. It's like, well, you're using a lot of willpower every time you make a choice to follow your diet that requires you to exert, willpower, right? And we all run out of willpower at some point. So what the research shows on people who successfully lose weight long term versus people who don't, it's not that they have more willpower, it's that they set conditions up for themselves so they don't need willpower in order to stick to their diet as much, right? They set it up so it's easier, right? It's much easier not to eat the chocolate cake in the fridge if there's no chocolate cake in the fridge. And it's much easier to stick to your diet if your diet is fun, easy, and you feel full and satisfied. Right? So if we can make the diet fun, easy, and make you feel full and satisfied and have no chocolate cake in the fridge, it's going to be way more likely that you're going to stick with the diet. All right, so I see a couple of questions in there about metabolic rate and water and protein powder. I'm going to pause those till the end. So please, they're going to get lost in the chat. So please remind me of those at the end. All right. So we come to some diet things and other behavior change strategies to make it easy to stick to by eating high protein with every meal, high fiber, low calorie flavorings to make it fun, setting goals, keeping a food and exercise diary, and daily or weekly weighing. Now, adherence is much greater when the diet closely resembles the usual diet. So if you come to me for weight loss, and I say to you, okay, whatever you normally eat, forget that. We're going on this special chicken breast and broccoli diet, right? Where you normally don't eat that, right? That's going to be much harder for you to sustain, right? Because what about when you're cooking for the kids? They don't want to eat chicken breast and broccoli, or when you go out with friends, or when you have family over, or whatever. It's like all of those situations, it's very difficult, right? Plus, we're all creatures of habit, and we go to the fridge or the cupboard for the things that we habitually eat. And so if we change things radically, it makes it harder. It's more mental effort to stick with it, right? So if we keep you eating the same things you normally eat, but just less, it's easier to stick to than changing things up radically, okay? And when we say less, we don't necessarily mean less food, okay? Because the distinction here is you need to eat less calories, right? Not less food, right? Imagine a giant dish, a giant plate of steamed vegetables, right? Compared to a much smaller plate of triple deep fried French fries in duck fat, right? The smaller dish will have more calories, right? So if you actually eat the bigger dish with more food, you will actually eat fewer calories. So we need to draw that distinction between eating less volume, right, versus eating fewer calories, and they're not the same thing. And so there is a way we can actually eat more and lose weight because we're eating fewer calories. All right, so adherence is much greater when the diet closely resembles the usual diet for all of those reasons. So perhaps the best diet is just what you usually eat, but less. All right, so when you're hungry, you rely on willpower. It's very hard to feel hungry and to walk past the fridge and not go and grab something. So when you feel full, it's much easier to stick with your diet. So one of our big goals is for people on a diet is to feel as full as possible, as much of the time as possible, right? And ways to feel full, number one way is eating high protein, because protein increases what's called satiety, which just means how satisfied you are after a meal, right? So that feeling of I've had enough and I don't want to eat any more at the moment. So if you eat high protein with every meal, you feel fuller for longer, right? There's less temptation to eat. If you eat bulky, high fiber, low calorie foods like vegetables, not fried vegetables, but steamed or raw or boiled, vegetables, or berries, things that are bulky and high in fiber, but relatively low in calories compared to, something fried or fatty of the same, volume. Now, it's unclear whether this actually increases satiety. Some studies find it does, some studies find it doesn't. But there is a very strong correlation with people who eat a higher fiber diet consistently lose more weight than people who eat a low fiber diet. So it's definitely worth including bulky, high fiber, salads, veggies, and berries, right? That's what we're talking about in the diet as a mainstay, in order to increase satiety, probably, but definitely increase weight loss. So this looks like a meal. Every meal is protein plus veggies, right? And when you put it that way, it's like, well, yeah, that kind of sounds like the healthy diet guidelines, right? Lots of veggies and fruits and some lean protein. Yeah, that's what it is. It's just normal healthy eating, right? So this isn't like special diet food. It's like that's just what healthy diet represents. Now, protein could be tofu, it could be beans, it could be fish, it could be chicken, it could be meat, it could be dairy. There's lots of different ways you can get the protein. Raw or steamed or boiled, microwaved veggies, berries, fruits. Some fruits are relatively high calorie, like the really sweet ones, because that sugar makes them high calorie. But yeah, berries and veggies and salads and things are very high bulk, very low calorie per, square centimeter. So that's like what you eat. And so my lunch every day, and I'm not joking when I say every day, like literally 7 days a week, is a massive bowl of steamed vegetables with tuna. Right? It's protein, and it's big, really big bowl, because that makes me feel satisfied, like emotionally. I'm like, oh, I just ate a really big bowl of lunch. And so that feels satisfying, and the protein makes me feel full. And then I add on some hot sauce, because I like hot sauce. So if you're eating at least 20 grams of protein, so when we say like high protein, that's what we mean, okay, 20 grams of protein or more with every meal, high fiber, and adding in low-calorie sauces and condiments. So things like hot sauce, rubs, seasonings, sprinkles, things that add a lot of flavor without adding a lot of calories. So I'm not talking about like creamy mayonnaise or that kind of stuff. Things that are like really flavorsome, add a lot of like piquancy to the dish, but don't have a lot of calories. And what that does is it just makes it fun. Okay, it makes it, you look forward to eating it more because it's got actual enjoyment in the process of eating. It's not just like boring another steamed chicken with steamed broccoli, for the 99th meal in a row. Marie.
Ralph, just a question regarding your lunch. Aren't you worried about the mercury accumulation in tuna if you eat it every day? Because that's what I've learned.
And I'm not saying it's not a thing. I'm just extremely blasé about such things. I never wash my veggies before I eat them, or that's just I'm just laissez-faire.
But do you weigh the tuna so you know how many grams of protein you take?
Yeah, I take it from a tin, and I read the protein on the outside, and I know how many grams of protein is in that. I choose the specific size of tin of tuna. I get line caught tuna and whatever, and so I choose a specific size tin because it's got that many grams of protein in it.
Cool, thank you.
And then just as many veggies as I can fit in the biggest bowl we've got in the house.
Thank you.
All right. So, if you just go to Amazon and just go crazy on hot sauce and seasonings and rubs and sprinkles and all of those kinds of things and rotate those each day so you've got like a different, like fun flavor that you enjoy eating, that really makes things a lot easier to stick to because you actually look forward to eating that meal because it's tasty. And the other thing that people do have success with, not a big personal favourite of mine because I'm not a massive sweet tooth, but a lot of people do find they work, are things like 0-calorie sweet treats. So like you can get like 0-calorie Jell-O and 0-calorie, whatever sweets. So if that's a temptation for you, that can work really well. Just again to make it fun and satisfying. So diet doesn't mean no pleasure in eating. Right, we're trying to make it pleasurable and fun and feel full. Right, weighing yourself. Oh, and sorry, the other thing that I didn't include on this page is just remove temptation. Like if you've got sweet cookies and chocolates and things in the cupboard, you have to, every time you open the cupboard, there they are staring at you, calling to you. It's much harder to not eat them than if they're just not in your house, right? So strategies that I've used are like, every now and then we have some ice cream. But then if we buy the ice cream and we eat some, we don't put the tub in the freezer, we throw it in the bin. So it's not there for next time. So it's just not sitting there. So yeah, I don't think there's like 0 calorie, but it's like basically, you can get something that's like 5 calories per serving or something, which is essentially 0, right? So the average adult uses about 2,000 calories a day, thereabouts, plus or minus. So, if it's something's like 5 or 10 or even 50 calories, it's essentially free. It's essentially 0. Right. Weighing yourself plus tracking your eating and exercise increases adherence and thus weight loss. And so this is what we're going to get to in the coaching section in a moment, that, rather than, you giving like highly specific advice, like, okay, eat 4 pickles instead of that sandwich that you normally make or whatever, like don't give very specific advice there because that's outside your scope, right, to give highly specific dietary advice. But if people simply track what they're doing, they notice, oh, holy crap, I ate a lot of chocolate yesterday, right? They suddenly notice what they're doing because they're actually writing it down. And if they correlate that with how much weight they gained or lost, the self-monitoring, like people don't need, it's not new information to people that, vegetables are going to result in more weight loss than chocolate. But what we all often don't do is like notice, our patterns, our own unconscious patterns of behavior. And so when we record that, what we eat and how much exercise we do and how much weight we gained or lost each day, we start to, those things, like we hold up a mirror and we're like, oh crap, I ate a lot yesterday and I put on weight. Oh, well, I can see those things are correlated. So we can start to self-monitor in the moment and go, oh yeah, yesterday I had that 3rd helping of pasta. Today I'm going to say no to the 3rd helping of pasta, right? Because you can see the results and you can notice those behaviors in yourself. So that's why weighing and self-tracking, like monitoring your exercise and your diet, is effective. And also, self-weighing is not associated with negative mental health outcomes. Now, if somebody already has disordered eating or an eating disorder, okay, that's outside the scope of this lecture, and you shouldn't be working with somebody who's got an eating disorder or disordered eating. They should be working with a dietitian, a psychologist. I'm talking about a relatively mentally healthy person who's just a few pounds overweight and wants to lose a few pounds. Okay, that in that population, daily weighing doesn't negatively impact mental health. And keeping a food diary increases adherence and weight loss. So just writing down what you ate makes you lose more weight, right? Because all of a sudden you notice what you're eating. Recording what you eat and your exercise increases weight loss. It's very significant, like 3 times the weight lost. Setting goals also increases weight loss. And celebrating successful behavior. So rather than celebrating the weight you lost, celebrate the behaviors that led to the weight loss, whether or not you lost the weight, because it's the behaviors that are the predictors of success. So this was a study, a systematic review from 2014. They looked at healthy strategies for successful weight loss and weight management. And they found that being in an energy deficit is number 1. Eating reduced fat was associated with, and increased fiber was associated with weight loss, exercise, and self-monitoring. Those were key strategies that were common traits of people who lost weight long-term and kept it off. And so in terms of scope of practice, like I mentioned before, it is within your scope of practice to give general nutritional advice that's in line with dietary guidelines, right? If you say to somebody, hey, it's generally healthy to eat a wide variety of, fruits and vegetables and grains and sources of lean protein every day, that is within your scope of practice because that is just publicly available information for all people. Okay. But where you would exceed your scope of practice is if you say, oh, you should take magnesium, or you should stop eating tuna and start eating salmon, or you should, eat 400 grams of broccoli or whatever, right? So don't give specific advice. But if you give general advice, like eat more fruits and veggies and lean protein, that's completely within your scope of practice. And if you want to look up the dietary guidelines, which I highly recommend, there they are. and you can link to them there. But just to summarize for you what they say, which probably is not going to be a massive surprise for you, eat a variety of fruits, vegetables, grains, legumes, lean meat, fish and poultry, and dairy. Use small amounts of oils and fats and prioritize unsaturated oils. And avoid or rarely consume alcohol and highly processed food. Was that a massive surprise to anyone? Probably not. Okay, so that's the advice that you can and should give your clients if they ask for nutritional guidance, right? But don't say eat this fruit or avoid fruit and eat vegetables or avoid meat and eat whatever. Like, you shouldn't give advice that is different to this, but you can give that advice and be within your scope of practice. Right? So you might have a personal view that you should avoid or eat more or less of some of these foods. That's fine, but you shouldn't give that advice to clients because that is a specific nutritional advice. Marie?
Yeah, just a quick question, because I've done a nutritional course like way back, and they told us that the older people get, the less calories they need. And I wonder if people really stick to exercise, like to the guidelines, because then normally they would need that amount of calorie throughout their lives, right? So is that a false advice in this case? Because if people exercise, of course, they need the calories also to feed their muscle, right? Because otherwise they lose the muscle mass, as far as I understand. Yes. So this is probably advice for people who do not exercise whatsoever, or what's the deal with that?
Yeah, well, so as you age, if you lose muscle mass because you don't do resistance training, you will need fewer calories to maintain your body weight, because muscle mass is very metabolically active and requires a lot of calories to keep it going. So someone who's more muscular will need to eat more calories than someone who's less muscular, even if they do the exact same amount of activity. Right? Yeah. If there's a muscular person sitting on a couch and a non-muscular person sitting on a couch, the muscular person will burn more calories sitting on the couch. So yeah, if we maintain our muscle mass, we need to eat more. But really, you can, in terms of monitoring, you can get as detailed as you want and measure every calorie burned and every calorie consumed. Or you can just go, hey, here's a list of what I ate and here's how many minutes of cardio I did, right? It can be really, really general or highly specific. Now, that's kind of I would say, as far as I'm aware, it's not more or less effective to do it either way. It's based on your personality. Like, do you like to measure things and track things precisely, or are you just like, yeah, near enough is good enough? Okay. But it's more just about the awareness of what you're eating and what movement you're doing. And then if you, ultimately when you start tracking these things, and we'll look at a tracker in a minute, it'll tell you whether you're on track or not. And then you can adjust your eating and your exercise so that you get the result you want.
Yeah, but the point was just, and I hope you agree, that it's not a matter of age, right? It's a matter of your activity and your caloric intake.
I haven't seen research on that, so I wouldn't like to give like a definitive opinion. It's been my personal experience. I'm 53 years old now. I still eat a truckload more. Like, I eat as much as any 3 normal people that I've ever met. And I think it's probably because I've got more muscles than most people I hang out with. So yeah, so far I'm 53. That hasn't happened for me yet. But I don't have research on that. I can imagine physiologically, like, some processes do slow down as you age, like everything's less efficient. So I can imagine that your metabolic rate could drop, but also I can imagine, well, maybe that's probably largely, like you say, because people lose muscle mass and become less active. And so what if you had a very active, muscular 75-year-old? I can see it could be totally reasonable to expect that they would have the same caloric needs as a similarly active and muscular 30-year-old. Right? So I don't have a strong opinion on that. But at the end of the day, I think it doesn't matter. And when it comes to that preference of tracking calories versus just like near enough is good enough, I'm much more of a near enough is good enough person. I don't track calories, never have. But the point is, you don't need to. You can individualize people's behavior and diet based on whether they're achieving their result or not. And you just adjust accordingly.
Thank you.
All right. This was a study of 10,000 people who'd maintained long-term weight loss, and they found that the common threads in these people were 78% ate breakfast every day, 75% weigh themselves at least once a week, 62% watch less than 10 hours of TV per week, and there are multiple studies showing that weekly TV watch time is correlated with weight gain. And it's not because you're sitting, because people who read books for the same amount of hours don't gain the same amount of weight. It's because when we watch TV, two things happen. One is we're subjected to a lot of advertising for food. And the second thing is we eat unconsciously. And I'm sure we've all been there. So TV time is correlated with weight gain. 90% exercise on average, about 1 hour per day. All right. List 5 strategies to make it easier to stick to your diet without using willpower. Amy, that's a great point about daily weight fluctuations. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. Okay, good answers, team. So eat protein with every meal, makes you feel full for longer. Eat high fiber, so like veggies, fruits, and salad, because they kind of fill you up physically. They stretch your stomach, but they don't contain a lot of calories. And use high flavor condiments, whatever you enjoy, that has low calories in it. So seasonings and sauces and things like that, as long as they're low calorie ones. Also, just removing temptation. Take that chocolate cake out of the fridge and throw it in the bin or give it to a friend. Okay, great. List 3 examples of high flavor, low calorie condiments. Good answers, team. I was hoping I'd get some specific brand recommendations here because I might go out and buy them. All right. Hey Siri, list 3 foods with at least 20 grams of protein per serve.
I don't.
Not a joke. Like, the reason I'm asking you this is because before I said, like, have 20 grams of protein with each meal to feel full. And my assumption is you don't know, like, what you would need to eat. Is that like a 1 kilo steak, or is it the smallest possible tin of tuna, or 3 soybeans? Like, how much? What's got 20 grams of protein in it? Oh, I like these specific answers. 22 grams in grilled salmon and broccoli, 100 grams of tofu. Nice. Very good. True or false? Regular weighing is associated with more long-term weight loss. And the answer is true. Okay. There is such a thing as a healthy weight range. abs are made in the kitchen. Prioritize resistance training and high protein to keep your muscle mass as you lose fat. Which diet you choose is almost insignificant, just whether you stick to it is what matters. But if you choose a diet that you can stick to, then the diet is important. Make it easy to stick to it by having high protein with every meal, high fiber, low calorie flavorings, setting goals, keeping a food and exercise diary, and daily or weekly weighing. All right, so this is all the mechanics, right? These are the strategies and tactics, the tips and tricks to, the mechanisms of how to do it. Now we're going to talk about how to coach someone or yourself, but in particular, someone else for effective weight loss. And so we already talked about coaching, and we said that a great coach gets you to do the things you need to do so you can become what you want to become. And so when we coach our clients, we're going to use our OARS skills to discover their why. Because one of the things a great coach does is holds you accountable to your goals and doesn't accept your excuses. Okay. And so in order to do that, what a great coach also does is holds a mirror up to you and says, well, you said this was important to you because of X, Y, and Z, and you said you wanted to become this person. So what would this person that you want to become do in this situation? So in order to be able to hold the mirror up, we have to know what's important to this person. So we're going to use our OARS skills to discover their why. So what is your goal? That's a really simple question. Then why is that important to you? That's important. That's a more important question. And you can ask this multiple times, and you may have heard of the 5 whys. Okay. So what's your goal? I want to lose 10 pounds. Okay. Why is that important to you? I want to fit into my old jeans again. Okay. Why is it important to you to fit into your old jeans? Oh, because I've got all these clothes I can't wear. Okay. And why is it important to you to get back into those clothes? Oh, because I've got a birthday with a 0 coming up. Or, you can get deeper and deeper and deeper into people's real reasons, right? And it might get down to, well, I've got a birthday with 0. Why is that important? Okay, well, I want to be a good example to my daughter, right? I want to feel like a good mum. Or I want to still feel desirable for my husband, or who knows what, right? That is at the bottom of it for each person. And so when you get to the real reason, right, not the socially acceptable reason, but the real reason, that's when you've got something, you've got a mirror that you can hold back to them. Okay. So just imagine we're 4 weeks into the program, right? And they come back to you and they say, okay, yeah, and I didn't keep my exercise diary this week, or I didn't keep my food diary this week. And you say, well, hold on, what happened to the woman that wanted to be a good example to her daughter? Where's that woman? Right? And then they're like, oh, you got me. Okay. So, but it only works, and nothing works perfectly because we're dealing with humans, right? But it only works, most of the time when you actually have the real reason, not just like, oh, remember you wanted to fit into those jeans? Right? Which is just like a super surface level reason. Thumbs up if that makes sense. All right. So why is that important to you? And you can go, it doesn't have to be literally 5 times, but okay, so why is it important to you to fit into your jeans? Okay, and why is that important to you? Okay. And you'll know when you get there because you'll just feel like this is real, this is authentic. All right, what have you tried in the past? Oh, I've tried Weight Watchers, and I've tried the celery diet, and I've tried this, and I've tried that, and I've tried blah, blah, blah. Why do you think that didn't work? And when you So if we think about this, what we're doing here, it's Pilates Jiu-Jitsu. Okay, remember Pilates Jiu-Jitsu? Why do you think your back's sore? Oh, because of my core strength. Okay, well, let's fix your core strength then. Okay. So why do you think that celery diet and the Weight Watchers and the whatever didn't work in the past? Oh, I didn't have someone to hold me accountable. Oh, well, so if we work some accountability into this process, do you think that'll help you? Yes, I think it will. Okay. Oh, I hated the celery diet because it was so boring and I hated eating. Right. Oh, well, if we make your diet fun and satisfying, do you think that'll help you? Yes, I think it will. Thumbs up if that makes sense. After all this time, okay, you've tried the celery diet, you've tried Weight Watchers, you've been yo-yoing with your weight for 10 years, whatever it is, okay? Why, after all this time, like, why are you reaching out to me now about this? Why are we having this conversation now? Why is it important to you to do something about this now? Why do you think we're asking this question? What's the value in knowing this information? Genuine question, not rhetorical. Louise.
To find out how committed they are?
Partly to find out how committed they are. And as Marie said in the chat, to hold them accountable, okay? So when Marie comes in week 5 and she's like, oh, yeah, I didn't stick to my diet this week, or I think I'm going to take a break for a few weeks because it's really busy at work or whatever, okay? And then you say, Marie, well, Marie, you said to me, this is really important to you to do something about this now because X, Y, and Z reasons that Marie told you, okay? And now you're telling me that you want to stop. What's going on? You know, what happened to that woman that said this was really important now because of X, Y, and Z? And again, nothing's perfect because we're dealing with humans, but there's a much higher chance that when you confront them with their own words and their own true reasons why they're here, they're going to be like, oh, okay, you got me. Okay, I'll figure it out. I'll find a way. So it's to hold them accountable. It's basically we're getting ammo, right? We're getting the mirror, we're polishing the mirror to hold it up to them later, because later is when it gets hard, right? Right now, day 1, they're not on the diet yet, easy, right? After you've been on the diet for 5 weeks, it gets boring, it gets hard, it gets monotonous. You know, it's easy, temptation happens. So we're getting the ammo for later. We're polishing up the mirror to hold them up the mirror and go, you said this, okay? What if nothing changes? Okay, you said you've been struggling with your weight for 5 years. I mean, what if in 5 years, the next 5 years is like the last 5 years? What's your plan if that happens? Now, that's a pretty confronting question, okay? So you have to have trust before you can ask a question like that, right? You have to be asking this question genuinely for their benefit, and they have to believe and know that you're doing that, right? You're here to coach them on this, right? So you have to have rapport and trust with this person. But if you say, okay, so why is this important to you? Why is that important? Why is that important? Okay, so why is it important to do this now? Okay, so what if nothing changes? I mean, you've been tried this diet and this diet and this diet and this diet. Like, what if nothing changes? This is to get them associated with the cost of doing nothing. Okay, and if they say, well, if I'm still like this in another 5 years, you know, I'll feel this or I'll do that or I'll have this problem. Okay. And again, it's just polishing the mirror, right? So when they call you up in week 5 and say, hey, I'm just going to take a break for a week, you say, well, hold on. You said to me, thumbs up if that makes sense. Okie doke. All right. So are you ready to do something about this? Right. And if you've just associated with them with why it's important and why it's important to do it now and what happens if they don't do something about it, well, and they've already come to you and asked you about it, okay, then the answer should be like, heck yes, I'm ready to do something about this. All right. So what good oars looks like is they do most of the talking because you're asking questions. You don't offer solutions at this point. You're just asking them why it's important to do this. You reflect what they experienced, but they did not say. Right? So they might say, you might say, okay, what's your goal? I want to drop a dress size. Why is that important to you? Oh, I want to fit into my old wedding dress. Or why is that important to you? Bam, 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 bam. And then you might say, okay, so, so this is about like feeling like you felt, 20 years ago in your own body, right? Which she didn't say to you necessarily, but you're thinking, all right, you want to fit into your wedding dress, you got married 20 years ago. That's a reasonable kind of extrapolation. Now, you might be wrong, right? She might go, oh, it's not that, it's more this, okay? Or you might be right, but a good reflection reflects what you think they meant, but not necessarily what they actually said. Point out the client's strengths and resources. Okay, so you've tried the celery diet and Weight Watchers and this and this and this in 5 years and you haven't succeeded. You've persevered on this for 5 years. That's incredibly gritty. Okay, this is really important to you and you're sticking with it and you're going to keep going until you find a solution. Okay, so point out their strengths. This is oars, right? Affirmations. Use relevant tonality. So when we're asking like, okay, why is it important to you to do this now? That's bad tonality, right? Why is it important to you to do this now? Versus like, so like, I'm curious, like after 5 years and all of these diets that you've tried, like, why come to me now? Like, why is it important to do something about this now? Right? So it's a curious tonality, okay, rather than like an accusing tonality or just like I'm reading off the script tonality. Okay, so the tonality is important and it should be curious, concerned, puzzled. All right, so once you know their goal and they're committed and you've polished up your mirror, ask if they'd like advice. Now, the answer is going to be yes, because they're literally coming to you asking for advice, but you're getting their permission to give advice. And remember, the light bulb has to want to change. So ask if they'd like advice. If they say, yes, I'd like advice, then you say, great, here's the strategy I recommend. Okay. Now, you're not just going to like choose a strategy out of the blue. Now, we've got all of those things that we talked about earlier, right? We've got all of these strategies that we talked about here. Okay. But the specifics are going to be based on what they told you. Okay. Why do you think those diets didn't work for you in the past? I didn't have accountability. Well, you're going to emphasize the accountability aspect, right? Or I hated the celery diet because it was so freaking boring and restrictive and I was hungry all the time. Well, we're going to find a diet that's going to make you feel full and excited to enjoy your meals, right? So you're customizing it based on what they think is important, right? But the general gist of it is going to be the same. Does that make sense? All right. So it's kind of everyone gets the same, and it's also everyone gets a customized version of the same. All right, so we've discovered their why. They're committed. We're going to outline a strategy, and we're going to emphasize whatever they think is important there, whatever was the problem for them in the past and why they think those previous attempts didn't work for them. And I'm going to recommend that you share and explain a weight loss tool. Right? I've made one for you. Here it is. Just like when you give someone a home exercise program, okay, we saw that it's important to actually go through the exercises with them and make sure they're confident and they know how to do them and all of that stuff, and to not give them too many exercises. So the same rules apply here. So we're going to use this weight loss tracking sheet or some other tool. Like there's nothing magic about this sheet. I just made it up for you. But this is what I recommend. If you've got, people might prefer to write it in a paper diary or whatever, that's totally fine. Doesn't matter what tool you use. But this one will do the job. All right, so this is a Google sheet. you can make a copy of it. And basically how it works is here we've got week 1, week 2, week 3, etc. And each week we've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, blah, blah, blah. Right? Then for each day we've got the food, exercise, and your weight. Now, I'm going to recommend weighing daily. And I can't remember who put it in the chat, but it is true that our weight fluctuates daily, and that is almost, certain not to be like fat gain or loss. It's like if you had more water to drink the night before, or if you had a more bulky meal the night before, or if you've got different hormonal balance in your body and you're retaining fluid more or whatever. So daily fluctuations in weight are not related to whether you're losing or gaining fat, but the average weight over the week is going to indicate whether you're gaining or losing fat, right? Because it'll fluctuate on a daily basis, but weekly fluctuations are much more likely to be actual body mass changes. So that's why I like daily weighing. Weekly, the evidence is weekly works equally well. My personal preference is daily. So you would just literally weigh yourself on Monday. You can put it in pounds or kilos, doesn't matter. Okay, so just say you weigh like 150 pounds, right? Bam. Now your average weight is 150 pounds, right? If we then weighed on Tuesday and we're 153 pounds, now our average weight is 151.5, and so it calculates the average for you. Okay, and if we keep doing that, it was 149 the next day and 148 the next day and 149 the next day and 147 the next day. Well, now our average weight is 149.3, let's say, right? And if we put our starting weight in here, and our starting weight was 150, well, it says this week we've lost 0.7 of a pound, right? So that tells us whether we're moving forwards, backwards, or staying still. Thumbs up if this is making sense. Okay, so you just fill in your weight every day, and if you miss a day here or a day there, it's not the end of the world. Okay, but if you basically fill it in most days, most weeks, you'll see this average will trend, up or down or about the same. And then we can put in our food. Now, I've put in like kilocalories here. You could put in like, okay, I ate this many calories of food this day. And the way you do that is you just get a tracker. Like there's a bazillion free trackers you can download on your phone or your computer that will tell you, hey Siri, how many calories in a, Krispy Kreme sugar glazed donut or whatever, okay, or in a, 40 grams of salmon with broccoli, okay, and you can just find that out really easily and put the calories in there. Or you can just literally type in, I had, salmon, blah, 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 okay, type in what you ate. If you put in a number here, like, just say you had a day where you ate like 2,000 calories, it's going to average out your daily calories for the week at the bottom there, right? So you just say you had 2,000, then you thought, okay, I better start my diet now, do 1,500, then I blew it out a bit, did 1,750 the next day, then I did 2,200, then I did 1,500, then I did 1,500, okay? Well, my average was 1,707. Okay, it tells me like, okay, I had a couple of days where I kind of blew my budget a bit, but on average, I did a good job, right? That was a good week. And so that focuses, this weekly average helps us focus out of the nitty gritty and not be too concerned about like, oh no, I ate that one piece of chocolate cake on Wednesday, and more like, okay, overall I was consistent with my diet on average, right? So I did a good job. And again, then the exercise, right? How many kilocalories of exercise did you do? And your smartwatch or your treadmill or your phone, you can download an app on your phone that tells you how many calories you burned when you walked, X number of steps or whatever. So those are pretty easy to measure, okay? Or you could just put in, I did 30 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever, right? It doesn't really matter, okay? Because this will just tell you what the average is. If you did 20 minutes today and 20 minutes tomorrow and 30 minutes, it'll tell you what the average is, okay? And then the magic of this is when you look at this and you go, okay, just say I did like, 45 minutes today and then I did 30 minutes today and then I did 60 minutes there and I did 75 minutes there and I did 15 minutes there, okay? Whoops, that hasn't averaged. That's summed. Because I did 6,075. let's call it 75. That's better. So then at the end of the week, okay, I'm filling this in for myself, okay, if I'm the client, and I look at this and I go, well, I can see what my patterns were and I can see what my results were. Right. And this gets to Marie's question about, okay, do older people need fewer calories or whatever? It's like, well, it doesn't matter how many specific calories you need, because you'll just see, okay, well, whatever I did this week was good. Right. So let's just do that again and we'll get the same result again. Right. Whereas if my weight went up this week, then I know, well, whatever I did this week moved me in the wrong direction. So I've got to eat fewer calories and burn more calories, right? And just make a small adjustment there so that next week this goes down. And so this is the magic of tracking and self-monitoring. Even if you track it just in terms of like minutes of exercise or like, listing the foods that you ate or whatever, okay? When you look at this, it gives you kind of a dashboard that lets you see like, okay, what did I do and what was the result? And therefore you can adjust your behavior accordingly. Do you have any questions about this?
Raf, I just do have a question. Like, I'm not that familiar with all of these spreadsheet sort of things, but it seems to be that it's calculating as you're going down. So it's coming up with those totals for you at the end of it all. Correct. So that 0.7%, that wasn't that you're an amazing mathematician. That was actually all done by the computer. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Phew.
Mr. Google did it for me, or Miss Google did it for me. Now, you don't have to use a spreadsheet, right? You could just use like a scrapbook or whatever, right? So the actual tool doesn't matter. I think the important thing is the person is tracking what they ate and how much they moved and their weight, right? And then by tracking that, they get to see themselves the correlations between those things. That's what's important. Okay, so almost done. So once you're tracking, okay, so your job as a coach is each week to ask them to report on their tracking. Hey, Michelle, good to see you. Show me your tracking sheet. Okay. And that's really important because they know they're going to have to show it to you. So they're going to fill it out. Right? That's the accountability part. And then you comment neutrally on their behavior. Okay. So we're not commenting emotionally or saying that was good or bad. And we're not commenting on their results. We're commenting neutrally on their behavior. Okay. You said you would do 2,000 calories of exercise this week and you did it. It's just stating a fact, right? You said you'd do this thing and you did it. Or you said you would do 2,000 calories this week, but you did 1,500. Right? Again, not saying it's good, not saying it's bad, just saying those are the facts. Okay? And all that is just holding up the mirror. Right? You said you would do this and here's what you actually did. Remind them of their why. Okay? Your daughter will be proud of you. Whatever their why is. Okay? Review challenges and goals weekly. Okay, so you struggled to hit that 2,000 calorie total this week. Why was that? What got in the way? Okay, do we need to make the goal different? Do we need to make the goal smaller? Or is there something we can build in to eliminate that challenge for next week so we don't have the same issue again next week? Reinforce the long view. Okay, so you blew out your budget on Wednesday because you went out with your friend and had a piece of chocolate cake. Okay, and you ate more than 2,000 calories. But isn't it great that over the week your average was still 1,700 calories a day, right? So this is a marathon, not a sprint. a day here, a day there doesn't matter. What's important is that over the long term, you stick to it over the long term on average, right? So the individual days don't matter anywhere near as much as the average of all of the days. You did a great job by sticking with it the rest of the week, right? So we're emphasizing and rewarding the behavior. All right. And so ultimately, a great coach holds you to a higher standard, teaches you to hold yourself to a higher standard, gives you strategies and tactics, doesn't buy into your excuses. Okay, well, I had to pick the kids up from school, and old friend came in from out of town, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, you told me you want to be this person. What would that person do when an old friend came in from out of town? Holds a mirror up to your behavior, reminds you of your why, keeps you focused on the goal, points out your strengths, and shows you how to win, but doesn't do it for you. Because the light bulb has to want to change. You can't do the push-ups for them. All right. So we saw there is such a thing as a healthy weight range. Abs are made in the kitchen. Prioritize resistance training and high protein. Which diet you choose is less important than whether you stick to it. It's easier to stick to it if it's easy to stick to it. And we can do that by giving high protein with every meal, high fiber, low calorie flavorings, setting goals, keeping a food and exercise diary, and daily or weekly weighing, and then holding the mirror up to those things. All right, that's it. Thanks for sticking around. I know we went 6 minutes over time. If you've got questions that I didn't answer, love to talk about them now.
Rath?
Hey, Ramsia.
Hi. I'm not sure if this is a question or just some general thoughts to bounce off everything. And I'm only going to use myself as an example because I'm not working with anybody in, age-wise. So the last 4 or 5 years, I think, lost. It's hard because I don't know if I was on an accurate scale. And I'm asking this as though I was a client. And I'm saying I have a client who will be 71 in August. And she looks slender. She's very athletic. She's a dancer. She eats well. She even eats under certain caloric intake to activity. But because perhaps of her age, she's lost some height. She's a little more thicker in the waistline, although still slender, slimmer waist. And in general, there's frustration for her to become as slim as maybe she was 7 years ago, when she could get into her certain genes. But maybe she needs to accept the fact that she's going to be 71 and she looks great and she blah, blah, blah. But there's still a lot of frustration left. So I just told you a little bit about myself, this frustration. And by working out and being in Pilates, I can see a difference from last year, but it's not moving the scale, nor is it taking away that more boxy, older look. I'm fighting, the belly weight. That's really minimal compared to many, but it's my own experience. And again, I am that client I'm talking.
Yeah. And so this is really a question about what is a meaningful goal, and is it realistic to have the same goal at 71 as you did at, say, 50? And I think there's the things that I would explore with that hypothetical client would be, okay, well, it is possible at any age to be in amazing shape, and you can fit into the same dress that you fitted into 7 years ago, right? But it does become harder as we get older, right? And so then it becomes a question of, okay, well, the cost versus the benefit, right? Is it important enough to you to put in the extra effort, now, right? And I can't answer that for you. That's for you to answer. If you say to me no, this is really important to me, I want to do whatever it takes. It's okay, well, we just have to eat less and exercise more, right? It's simple, right? But not easy.
No, that's really it. I was thinking just where you started the lecture. And I know if I get down to my gym in my building and I did more cardio, that alone, because I'm doing a lot with the Pilates machine and the mat work. And I'm very active in dancing. But I think the catch is, and I know I'm bouncing off my own question, but I think this is it. And I'm glad to have asked you it because it brings it really to the forefront. If I get down and did cardio, more cardio, and broke a sweat, I'd probably be in that size within 6-7 weeks or so. So that's all. Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of a redundant question, but
yeah. And for women, as past menopause, because of the hormonal changes, they do tend to put weight on more centrally, like more in the belly compared to in the hips, relative to younger in life, right? So, things do change that make it harder to be slender as we get older, but not impossible, right? So it's just a matter of like, well, how much is it worth to you, and do you care enough to make that extra effort? Right? And that's a question for each person to decide for themselves.
Okay.
Sarah says, 2 questions. How much does water play into all this? My understanding is there is a difference in qualities of protein powder. All right, so that's 2 questions. How much does water play into this? So on a daily basis, water will make a big difference to your weight, right? So if you simply don't drink enough one day, you can lose like a kilo overnight, but you haven't actually lost any fat necessarily. You just dehydrated yourself. So, daily fluctuations in weight are very likely to be, some combination of differences in how much fluid you have in your system. So whether how much you've drunk versus how much you've sweated or urinated out, or also just how much food you have in your digestive tract, right? If you ate a bulky meal, even if it was a very low calorie bulky meal, that's physical weight that you have inside your body. So that's going to change your weight on a daily basis. But if you if you drink a lot of water daily for a month, you're not going to gain more and more and more weight from that. So if you look at it, if we zoom out and look over a week or a month, those fluctuations are going to disappear, right? But on a daily basis, water will make a massive difference. And so if you just drink 2 liters of water or don't drink any water, you'll notice a big difference on the scales. And that's actually what weight class athletes do. One of the main strategies to lose weight for wrestlers and, whatever, weightlifters, etc., to hit their weight limit is they drink a lot of water. So they start urinating a lot, and then they don't drink any water for 24 hours before the weigh-ins. So they go in the sauna and all of that kind of stuff to sweat out all of that fluid and lose weight. But all they've lost is fluid. They haven't lost fat. And in terms of protein powders, yes, not all protein powders are equal. Some work better than others. And so there are 2 things with protein powder. One is just the combination of amino acids. So proteins are long chains of amino acids, and there are 22 amino acids that we need in our, to build all the proteins that we need to build in our bodies. And there are 17 essential amino acids that we can't manufacture in our bodies, right? So there are amino acids that we can't manufacture, and we have to get those from our diet. Now, not all proteins contain all of the essential amino acids, right? So animal proteins all do contain all the essential amino acids. Most plant proteins don't contain all the essential amino acids. Soy protein is the exception. So soy protein is very high in protein, and it contains all of the essential amino acids. So soy protein is a fantastic protein for vegetarians or vegans to take. It's the most complete protein, as in it has all of the essential amino acids. So that's one thing. But if you're having beans or something other than soybeans or something else, other sources of protein as a vegetarian, you have to combine different sources of protein to get all of the essential amino acids. So not all proteins are equal. Not all protein powders are equal. But if you have something like whey or casein protein, which are from animal sources, they have all of the essential amino acids in them. So they're high quality in that regard. So they're more effective for building muscle. So the first thing is that the quality of the protein in terms of its amino acid structure. The second thing is what's called bioavailability, right? So basically, how much of that protein can you actually digest and take into your body? And it tends to be the case for plant proteins that they're less bioavailable because the protein's bound up with fiber more, which we can't digest. And the protein kind of sticks to the fiber and we can't suck it off and put it into our bloodstream. So if you eat 100 grams of animal protein versus 100 grams of plant protein, well, more of the animal protein is actually going to get into your bloodstream and more of the plant protein is going to pass through your digestive tract to be excreted out, right? So you have to eat more plant protein to actually get the same amount of protein in your blood. So from both of those standpoints, the best protein in terms of it's got all the essential amino acids and it's really easy to digest is whey protein, WHEY, and that's from milk. Like you've heard little Miss Muppet said on her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. Well, whey protein is from milk. It also happens to be the cheapest protein you can buy. And so, if you don't have sort of dietary restrictions and you've got no problem with digestion of milk products, whey protein is, there's clear evidence from bazillions of studies that whey protein is the best, most effective protein. If for whatever reason you don't want to or can't eat whey, then soy protein would be my next preference, but it's more expensive. It's less bioavailable. You have to have more of it. It comes in smaller jars. You have to buy it at the organic store for 4 times the price. So I much prefer whey protein. But yeah, soy protein is good. And you can get other plant proteins like pea protein and different things, but they're less and less and less bioavailable, basically, and have less complete balance of amino acids. But yeah, if you're getting whey protein, I would just get like the most pure possible, like 97% protein sort of thing. And then once you've got that, like any brand, just the cheapest brand, right? Because whey protein is whey protein, so it doesn't really matter what brand. Is there a way to work out what daily intake is needed for maintenance when clients reach the goal weight? Yes, there is. I don't have it at my fingertips, but you could just go online and type in like daily, calorie calculator, that type of thing. And you'll be able to, it'll ask you like for your body mass and how active you are and your age and stuff like that. Then it'll give you an estimate of how many calories you need to eat per day. But it's going to be roughly 2,000, like 1,800 to 2,200, somewhere in there, depending on your age and your body mass and all that kind of stuff. And if you're very active, might be more like 3,000. Sarah says, I understand that soy protein has a problem due to estrogen levels over a long period of time. I haven't seen anything on that. I can't comment. I don't know. Don't have an opinion on that. I'm sorry. Judith.
This is a question not necessarily related to the weight loss thing, but if you're doing a HIIT workout, would that be considered cardio or strength? Because usually HIIT works are like for time or doing a certain amount of reps, but they don't take in if that's your rep max or anything like that. So that would be more cardio and considered towards the cardio side, I assume.
HIIT is a hybrid kind of workout, so it is kind of cardio and strength training. It's HIIT, high intensity interval training. That would be like burpees and sprints and those types of things. Skipping, 10 pull-ups followed by 10 burpees followed by 10 push-ups followed by 10 squats. Repeat. And so that is where you get high intensity cardio. So you're like at the end, you're raggedly breathing and lying on the ground with the room spinning around you. And it can also be, if they're scaled properly, like CrossFit does a really good job of this, can also be great for strength, right? Because you could be doing pull-ups or, pressing movements or deadlifts or whatever in there that are really challenging your strength. So they can do both at the same time. But a HIIT workout, because your cardiovascular system is being challenged so much, that's going to limit how much strength you can produce. So like if you've just done 10 burpees, you won't be able to deadlift as much as if you haven't just done 10 burpees, right? That's a fact. So you won't, if your goal is to maximize your strength, you should do strength separately to cardio, right? But if your goal is to just get strong and fit and in as little time as possible, then HIIT workouts are fantastic and you get like 80% of the benefit with 20% of the time, right? But if you want 100% of the benefit, you need to separate out the strength and the cardio. But in terms of weight loss, HIIT versus moderate intensity continuous training, they call it MICT in the studies, we just basically go for a jog, go for a walk, go for a bike ride, 30 minutes at VT1. They both, if you burn the same number of calories in a HIIT workout versus going for a walk, you'll have the same amount of weight loss, right? So it's just about the calories that you burn. There's no inherent benefit of, HIIT over moderate intensity training if you equate for calories. But the massive benefit for some people is you can get it over and done with in a much shorter time. Whereas for other people, freaking hate it and it's painful and it makes them want to feel nauseous. And so they much prefer to go for a walk for an hour rather than spend 15 minutes doing the same number of calories in burpees, right? So it's just a matter, it comes back to the same thing as the diet. It's like, well, which form of exercise you do is less important than whether you stick to it.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Because I did a time I did HIIT and I was a certain weight and then I did strength training and now I'm a little heavier, but that's not weird either because I'm like fucking strong. Yes. But I'm always confused. Like even in strength training, if your heart rate goes up, would it also be considered cardio? Because there's times that we are doing strength training,
right,
and my heart rate is like 150 something and
right,
breathing like a maniac,
Yeah. So strength training, cardio, if you go for a run, that's just doing like 5,000 reps of a quarter lunge, right? It's very light, high rep strength training. And so if we reverse that, we say, okay, you do 10 lunges, that's like very heavy, short duration cardio, right? It's kind of the same thing. It's just a continuum of whether the muscles or the cardiovascular system are the main constraint to that. And so, yes, strength training does improve your heart health and your cardiorespiratory health, but not to the degree that cardiorespiratory training does. So, and if you are in, the studio doing push-ups and lunges and whatever, and your heart rate's going up, in that time, your heart rate only goes up for a much shorter amount of time because then you stop doing your squats or lunges and you take a break and do some mermaids or whatever, and your heart rate goes down again. Whereas if you're going for a jog, the heart rate stays elevated for a much longer period of time. So if your goal is to burn calories, a jog is a much more efficient way of doing it than doing lunges. Yeah.
And in the very beginning, I asked something like, what you base the intake of protein on the weight that the person wants to have. And like that's how you calculate it, right? So, but that would be solely set on like this person that like wants to weigh a certain like this kind of kilos or pounds, whatever your measurement thing is. Like there is not such a thing as ideal weights, or if there is such a thing, how would you calculate that?
In terms of ideal weight, there is an ideal weight. There is an ideal range, for each of us. And, that's the 20 to 24.9, BMI. And so I guess I would use that for a normal physique person, like someone who's not particularly athletic, right? So because as you alluded, when you do strength training, you put on weight because you're putting on muscle, right? But you don't necessarily change shape in a way that you don't want. Like you put on muscle, but you don't put it on in your stomach, right? You put it on in your shoulders and your thighs and your butt and the places that most people want to put it on, right? So when the more athletic you become, the less useful BMI is, and the less useful weight is as well. So we need to go to things like waist circumference or hip circumference and those types of things. So, you know, I wouldn't focus on weight per se. If for somebody who's like athletic, I'll be like, okay, what size waist do you want to aim for, or what size dress do you want to fit into, or whatever. And it's like sometimes as you become more athletic, there are downsides to that. Like I find it difficult to buy shirts that fit me, you know. So it's like, yeah, you just have to find like something that the person's comfortable with. But in terms of like, just in terms of the BMI side of things, and so that healthy range of 20 to 25. So the reason one of the reasons I included that in the lecture is like, well, if someone comes to you and their BMI is 20 and they want to lose weight, well, I think then you have kind of an ethical dilemma of like, well, should I actually help this person lose weight? Because I don't think it's actually in their best interest long-term, health-wise, to lose weight at this point, right? So that might be a conversation that you need to have with that person around like, well, why is it important to you to lose weight? Because actually you're going to decrease your health by doing that, right? And it might turn out that maybe they actually just want to look better or something. It's like, well, why don't we just get you toned up by putting on some muscle, you know? And that might achieve the actual goal rather than like losing weight per se. Or maybe they need to go see someone else who can counsel them, you know, through that. But yes, I think that's the health, knowing that healthy weight range is, I think it's valuable for us as exercise professionals and health professionals so that we can know, okay, well, if someone's in that range and they want to lose weight they will still be in that range. Or they're out, or if they're above that range and they want to lose weight to get into that range, well, I think I've got zero ethical issue with helping somebody do that because you're going to improve their health by doing that. But if someone's in that range and they want to get under that range, that's when we come to a situation where you would probably, in my view, we shouldn't be helping that person facilitating that. Anything else? Or are we done? Thanks so much, everybody. Hope you have a wonderful week.
Thanks, Rob.
See you in Slack. And we've got
Thank you.
one more week of this
Thank
module.
you.
Can't believe it. See ya.
Thanks, Rob.
Oh, is there then no research project since we had this?
This is
today?
instead of the research project. There is a research project in the next module, but this is instead of the research project. Yes.
Yeah.
See ya.
See you, folks. Have a good one.
Thanks, Rob.